Well, joining me now is Charlie Hurt, Washington Times opinion editor and Fox Business contributor. And this is going to be fun, Charlie. After all these years, who knew? Who knew that Judy Woodruff was actually a spy for the Republicans masquerading as a left-wing journalist, right?
No, it's truly incredible. But honestly, this is how these people operate. And the degree of delusion that goes on in Nancy Pelosi's mind to actually think that she could get away with accusing somebody like Judy Woodruff, a nice lady and everything, but hardly some sort of rock-ribbed conservative or even somebody who I would think of as giving Republicans even a fair shake on most days. But this is kind of the mentality that all these Democrats have, and it's what they've sort of grown used to from everybody in the media. They're all sort of got their thumb on the scale for Democrats.
But, you know, Charlie, it really does remind me, not that I remember, because it was a little before my time, but just on the cusp of my time, it really does remind me of the McCarthy era, because if you stray from the orthodoxy, what you're supposed to say, just 1 millimeter, you're immediately accused of being a dirty fill-in-the-blank. And the McCarthy era was a communist. Now it's a Republican, or even worse, a Trump supporter. That's sort of shaming. You said she doesn't get away with it. She does get away with it most of the time.
She does, but the reason she gets away with it is because the entire media, 95% of the media out there, is in her pocket, and they're doing Nancy Pelosi's bidding for her. And stop and think about it for a minute. People talk about how much trouble Donald Trump is in the polls, and you know, there are obviously some polls where the Trump campaign would like to be doing better. But if you were to add up the amount of negative advertising, the amount of negative media that Donald Trump suffers through every single week, it is astonishing. Right. And this is a good reminder of what it is that President Trump is up against every single week and will be throughout the election. He is up against a true monolith in the media that is absolutely opposed to him, opposed to his supporters.
And completely supportive of Biden. I mean, as we mentioned, this Washington Post fact checker, it's extraordinary. Yeah. Even if they have to cover up for Biden's mistakes or try to and lie in order to do that. I mean, this guy said that essentially Biden didn't say something that Biden himself actually later apologized for. I mean, that was extraordinary, using a lie to cover up something that Biden actually did. I mean, it's crazy. Let me move on, if I can, to the Democrats, and they're pushing this attack on the NRA, trying to completely dismantle the NRA, which, by the way, has a membership, I believe, of about 20% of the members are registered Democrats. It's extraordinary that during a crime wave, the two things that are most vital to Americans right now are police to protect them, and if they can't get police protection, guns to protect them. They want to take away the two things that will protect Americans from this crime wave. Does that make any political sense?
Yeah, I really don't know what it is that they're going after here. And if they think that they're just going after the National Rifle Association because they don't like the NRA and they've tried to make the NRA this evil boogeyman, okay, whatever. The reason that the NRA has the SWAT that it has in Washington has nothing to do with the NRA. It has to do with the millions and millions of law-abiding American citizens who rely on gun ownership to protect themselves. And I've been in a lot of gun stores in the last couple of months. Anybody who's been into a gun store lately knows
they're flying off the shelves.
There's hardly any guns for sale. They're flying off the shelves. And the number of first-time gun owners who are flocking to gun stores, and the diversity of those people who are going in there to buy guns, again, not to commit crimes, not to do anything,
but to
protect their families and themselves and their neighbors from, as you point out, the crime wave or just the uncertainty. It's an amazingly tone-deaf thing. And you know, I don't know what the AG of New York is thinking about doing this, but I can tell you this: it absolutely helps President Trump's reelection to have these Democrat politicians going after gun owners,
Charlie,
3 months before the election.
Very quickly, one final point where I think the Democrats are also making a serious political error. Pelosi denying Americans, those unemployed Americans who are receiving federal subsidies, not all of which I happen to agree on, by the way. I think they're too much, that $600 in addition to state unemployment checks. However, the president has said, look, I want to continue it until we figure out something better to do with this program. But Democrats are so obstinate, they won't even go along with the president on this. He may have to have an executive order in order to make sure that those checks continue, despite the fact that they've run out according to legislation this week. Don't you think Democrats are also making a mistake here? Quickly.
Absolutely. Democrats are playing chicken in the middle of a national crisis, in the middle of a global pandemic. They're playing political chicken. And the fact that they would just play that game tells you about all you need to know about how much they actually care about getting us out of this mess.
They're playing chicken with the lives of unemployed Americans. If they were playing chicken just with themselves, I wouldn't mind, but they're playing it with the lives of millions of unemployed Americans. Charlie Hurt, great to see you, my friend. Have a good weekend. Appreciate it.